When FIFA awarded the 1994 World Cup to the United States, the entire world was stunned. Football was simply not popular in this country. It lagged behind even tractor pulls in terms of public interest. 90% of Americans had no idea the cup was coming to their shores. The remaining 10% didn't care. What would follow became one of the most unexpected stories in sports history. And now, 32 years later, football is returning to the American continent, bolder, more ambitious, and more experienced than ever before. When FIFA awarded the 1994 World Cup to the United States, the entire world was stunned. Football was simply not popular in this country. It lagged behind even tractor pulls in terms of public interest. 90% of Americans had no idea the cup was coming to their shores. The remaining 10% didn't care. What would follow became one of the most unexpected stories in sports history. And now, 32 years later, football is returning to the American continent, bolder, more ambitious, and more experienced than ever before. To understand just how remarkable 1994 was, you need to understand what America looked like at the time. There was the NFL, which had every American obsessed. There was baseball, filling stadiums with tens of thousands on weekends. There was the NBA, where Michael Jordan was teaching a nation to love basketball. Football? Football was a game that adults didn't know, and children only played on Saturday mornings. There was no top-level professional football league in the country. The old North American Soccer League had collapsed in 1984. When FIFA awarded the hosting rights to the United States in 1988, many within the football world saw it as a massive gamble, a huge risk, but one worth taking. But FIFA had one condition. They would give the World Cup to America, but they wanted a sustainable professional football league to be established. The United States would need to take concrete steps toward becoming a football nation after the tournament. Would they truly become one? We were all about to find out. That condition gave birth to Major League Soccer, MLS as we know it today. It started with 10 clubs and eventually grew to 30. As things stand today, 18 of the world's 50 most valuable clubs play in MLS. The league also holds the second highest total attendance in the world, behind only the Premier League. The scale of that growth is, in a single word, extraordinary. The date was June 17, 1994, Pontiac Silverdome, Michigan. The first ever indoor World Cup match in history. Germany against Bolivia. The stadium, built for American football, was completely full. Exactly 63,000 people. Not football fans. Americans. All of them curious, all of them skeptical. An ear-splitting roar. What no one could have predicted was that they would stay. And that they would scream with everything they had. By the quarterfinals, the United States would reach the round of 16 for the first time since 1930. And the people of this country would quietly fall in love with football, and football would become a passion in this land. When the final whistle blew at the Rose Bowl on July 17, 1994, Brazil were champions and Italy had lost on penalties. The numbers told a story no one had dared to tell. 3,587,538 spectators had followed the tournament. Reaching such a figure was extraordinary. That number remains the highest total attendance in World Cup history to this day. Average per match, 68,991. Records that, despite every subsequent tournament featuring more teams and more matches, still stand 32 years later. The United States had not merely hosted the World Cup, it had written another record into World Cup history. The 1994 World Cup left behind a surplus of $50 million, exactly twice what anyone had expected. That money was transferred to the U.S. Soccer Foundation, and Major League Soccer launched 2 years later, in 1996, with 10 clubs and one promise, that football in America would never again be homeless. The impact it left behind was incredible. Young people turned to football in droves. Every young player dreamed of playing in Europe. First, the women's national team emerged as a global power, winning the 1999 World Cup at the Rose Bowl in front of 90,000 fans. David Beckham came in 2007. Lionel Messi in 2023. People could not have imagined such a trajectory, but now it was real. That said, the road between 1994 and 2026 was not without its obstacles. The United States failed to qualify for the 2018 tournament in Russia. A blow, a disappointment, call it what you will, for a rising American football nation. Canada, meanwhile, had only ever appeared at one World Cup. eliminated in 1986 without scoring a single goal. That failure clarified one thing. They needed to host an event immediately. When the United States, Canada, and Mexico submitted a joint bid to host the 2026 World Cup, they won the majority vote at the FIFA Congress. The 2026 World Cup was coming to North America. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is, without question, the largest tournament in the history of the competition. 48 teams, 104 matches, 3 host nations, 16 cities. For the first time ever, the world would witness a World Cup simultaneously organized by 3 countries. Football fans everywhere were electric. The fire of the cup was about to be lit again. Across continents, supporters would be glued to their screens day and night, willing their nations forward. This wasn't just a tournament, it was a festival. Fans would cross borders to be part of the greatest show on earth. It was also, in its own way, a logistical triumph for all 3 nations. The United States would host 60 matches, including both semifinals and the final. Canada, 13. Mexico, 10. Together, they would take football's fever to its peak. 9. America, a country that once couldn't even fill football stadiums, has been building dedicated football-specific venues since 2018. That is no small number. MLS attendance has grown by 33%. There is now a generation that grew up watching the '94 World Cup, and dozens of players from this continent who feature at the world's biggest clubs. For Canada, this is entirely new ground. They have never been part of an event like this. When the opening whistle sounds at BMO Field in Toronto on June 12th, Canada versus Bosnia and Herzegovina will be the first FIFA World Cup match ever played on Canadian soil. For Mexico, this tournament is something like an inheritance. The country that gave the world the 1970 and 1986 World Cups, the tournaments of Pelé and Maradona, is now hosting for a 3rd time. No nation in history has done this. Not Brazil, not Germany, not Italy. Only Mexico. In all of World Cup history, one ground stands apart from every city that has ever hosted the tournament. Estadio Azteca in Mexico City. Opened in 1966, built at 2,200 meters above sea level, on volcanic rock, a football cathedral with a capacity of 87,000. The only stadium to have hosted 2 World Cup finals. In 1970, Pelé lifted the trophy here. They lifted it in such triumph that many still consider that Brazil side the greatest of all time. In 1986, Diego Maradona produced the greatest individual performance in football history. The hand of God, the goal of the century, both happened at the Azteca. On June 11, 2026, the opening whistle of the greatest World Cup in history will sound in that same stadium. A 3rd time, and in a way that could only ever belong to this ground. And when Mexico walks out onto that pitch, in their own home, in front of their own people, in the very stadium where their ancestors once played, they will pull open the dusty shelves of history once more. In 1994, most Americans didn't even know the World Cup was coming. Today, in North America, it is nearly impossible to find a shop without a 2026 FIFA World Cup advertisement, or a restaurant or home without flags hanging in the window. Around 2 million tickets have already been sold. All 48 nations will come, some for the very first time. Jordan, Uzbekistan, Curacao, and Cape Verde are making their World Cup debuts. Others are returning after years away. Every one of them will chase a ball and sweat through their shirts carrying the hopes of their nations, there to bring their children's dreams home. The World Cup does not only show you football, it shows you a painting by an artist who captures every color of the world. Different stories, languages, borders, hopes, and heartbreaks. For the next 39 days, beginning June 11th at the Azteca in Mexico City, it will show us all of that once again. We are the Cup Files, and these are the stories behind the world's greatest tournament. Welcome